Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to today's webinar. My name is Patrick. I work here at SAP in Corporate Communications, and in that role, it's my pleasure to be your host for today's virtual session on how to accelerate your Rise with SAP journey. And personally, I can really tell you, because I was preparing together with our team some of the content for today, I can really tell you I'm quite excited for the next hour. Because together with our three industry experts, and you see them on the very first screen right here, we put together some valuable content for you. And at some point during the webinar, you will see all of those three guys here on stage. Let me quickly introduce you to all of them. So first things first, together with Michael, I will be giving a short introduction interview on, I would say, some of the major challenges that can come up during the migration to RISE and basically every S4 system. He's our Vice President Transformation Advisory in the Central Europe region. He has lots of experience with this stuff, and he will be kind of the introductory guide into today's session. And then next up, Daniel, one of our transformation managers. He's joining us from Bratislava, Slovakia. Welcome, Daniel. This is one of our global tech hubs here at SNP, and he will be exploring together with all of you ways on how to significantly reduce downtime of your systems during your migration. And then last but not least, it's not only about getting lean with data, but also about staying lean with data. So Klaus Zimmer, our dear colleague and solution architect, will explore together with all of you smart data management strategies on how to actually do that. I think, again, we have quite a cool show for you today. I'm really excited. And as I said, in my role as the moderator, I have basically three housekeeping rules of engagement, I would say. And if we follow all of them, I think we will have a really cool time together. So before we start, on the right side, you see in the middle, in the center stage, of course, our slides, our content, and our videos. And then on the right side, you see our interaction panel, right? And inside this interaction panel, you have two slots. Slot 1 is the Q&A, and slot 2 is for live polls. So this will be super important throughout the whole webinar, because at the end of today's webinar, of course, we want to hear from you. Personally, I think what makes webinars super valuable is actually the engagement and exchange at the end. So let's focus on that also today, but here we depend on your questions. So whenever you have a question throughout our webinar, feel free to just type it in here, press send, and then at the end, we can focus on them. On the live polls, we will come in just a minute. We will test this engagement tool a little bit out together. So wait for that. Number 2 on slide here, you see, please don't take notes, right? We will share the on-demand recording afterwards, obviously, so you can really fully immerse yourselves with the content that we bring up today. Last but not least, if you need them, if you want to try them out, if they are helpful for you, feel free to activate closed captions or live subtitles. If you are on Chrome or Edge, this should work for you. You should have a small button called CC down underneath the video. And here you can activate live subtitles in English only. This is what it's supported right now. Feel free to try to test it. And I think with that, these are kind of our 3 engagement rules for today, and we should have a good time together. Now, to test things out and to get warmed up a little bit, I would say, let's launch the first live poll. So take a look on the right, take a look on the polls, on the engagement panel, and here you should see the very first question that we have for you for today. Again, this is just to warm up and get you familiar with the tool that we are using. Our very first question for you today, because we want to see how global our SNP community is by now. From where are you joining us today? Let us know. I give you 1 minute so you can type in your answers. And we already see some of them. Oh, we have Colombia in the house, Switzerland, Paris, UK, India. Okay, we are already traveling around the globe, I would say. Mannheim, Heidelberg, can't miss them if it's a SNP/SAP event, right? Zurich is in here, USA is in here, Great Britain. Oh, I love it. Even more people from Colombia, Slovakia is in the house, Argentina. Okay, cool. Mission accomplished, I would say. This is already a cool first interaction. Thank you for that. Again, here on the right in the interaction panel, this is where you can participate in these kind of polls and also, most importantly, ask your questions. Cool. Thanks for participating in that. Now let's go back to our slides. And my very last slide is to once more guide you through the agenda. As I said, Michael will be up first. We will together explore challenges of a RISE with SAP migration. Daniel will take over and talk about how to minimize system downtime afterwards. And then Klaus will take the benefits of smart data management. And the last, probably around 10-15 minutes, will be for your questions. Cool. Then I would say let's start the show. Michael, why don't you join me up on stage?
Here I am.
Hey, hi, Michael.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Hi, Patrick. I'm good. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, so as we said, right, the first 10 couple of minutes will be to guide all of us through, I would say, some of the basic but significant challenges that such a transformation can come with. Obviously, we all know in the community that RISE with SAP presents numerous opportunities, right? That's clear. At the same time, there are some significant challenges and just things that organizations and customers need to be aware of. From your perspective, I would say, what are the main obstacles that customers face during the transition?
Yeah, Patrick, we can start with an easy one, right? As you know, by now, SAP allows ECC boxes to be moved into RISE with SAP, and that can already be a challenge. Moving a large box in a critical downtime, it might be a very large box, and the weekend is too short, or it just might be a very critical downtime because there's a foundry running and the goods need to be moved into the warehouse and the tickets need to be printed to move them. So in that sense, there we have a good solution, our near zero downtime approach, with which we can manage pretty much any downtime requirements. And Daniel will talk about that later. But I think the more relevant topic is moving to S4, right? And there are a couple of challenges. I think the first important milestone that needs to be achieved is a thorough assessment, right? And yes, also from a technical perspective, analyzing your SAP system, and we can support with our analysis, our crystal bridge analysis, basically our X-ray of SAP systems, very efficiently. But it goes far beyond that, right? It goes into what's new on the market, what new functionality is S4 offering. Where do I stand with my current implementation? Am I happy? What are the users are saying? Where are the pain points? We see a lot of really state-of-the-art functionality around finance and controlling with S4, and many customers are hesitant to implement because they don't know. And it's worthwhile doing a thorough analysis, knowing exactly where you want to go, what it takes, where are the pitfalls, etc., and then develop a roadmap on that, right? And from what I've seen in the market, those customers that have done that thoroughly, they can execute fast on the roadmap and they are efficient in terms of achieving the goals. And those who take shortcuts and do the quick project here and the quick project there, they generally turn, they at some stage they are getting caught up by not having done their homework properly.
Makes sense. Cool. Thank you. All right. Let's assume that the organization has done a very good job with the assessment, a thorough analysis, and everything is done. What comes next?
Then you're not a step ahead, right? You're not a step closer to your future architecture, right? Yeah. Then it's about execution, and then you are faced with the realities, right? There might be different priorities, plans being set up in new markets, or marketing strategies being changed, or reorganization happening, or economic downturns, or whatever case might be. And it is about balancing, right? What you want to achieve with the risk that you are taking, with the outcome, with the costs associated with the resources that you have available. And that's where our Bluefield approach comes in very handy, right? We have on the one side, for those customers that really want to just get it over and done with as fast as possible, what we would call a one-step approach, where we say, in one project, we do all of your preparational project plus the S4 move. And we have done this successfully with Creaton. You might know Creaton. Creaton are the ones that in Austria and Germany produce most of the roof tiles. So if you see a tiled roof in Germany, you can probably assume that it was produced by Creaton. Those guys were carved out by ETEX. And the IT manager said to us, hey, if I'm carved out, I don't have any of the IT team that was supporting the system. I need to do an S4 project. It will never work, right? So if you want to carve me out, you need to put me onto S4. So that's exactly what we did, right? We took them out of ECC. We put them onto S4. We cleaned up the customizing. They had 200 company codes in that system. We cleaned them up to 6 because only the 6 were carved out. We reduced all other customizing significantly, reduced the Z programs, add-ons, etc. Put them onto S4. In 12 months, they were up and running, right? And done and dusted with the S4 move, right? Straight into RISE. I think we were one of the, Creaton was one of the first customers on RISE, right? That's for the one-step approach. I think the more interesting part is where organizations use the opportunity of a technical change to also implement organizational change, right? And Voigt is a good example here. They came to us and said, I do need all of my history, so I need to have historic data, but I also need to change my controlling approach, right? So we implemented document split, we renamed cost centers, reorganized profit centers, introduced parallel ledger accounting and stuff like that, with a minimal disruption of the daily business, because all of the logistics users were just not affected by that change, right? A prime case that shows how agile our approach can be to an organization getting through all of this in a very fast and efficient manner. And then finally, we also have, since we are at the end of the day only doing a data migration, we are well positioned to do support a greenfield rollout, right? And Aeon is a good case where we're doing this currently on for the last 3 or 4 years. But going into Aeon would be another webinar, and it might be the follow-up session here.
Maybe we actually do that at some point in time. But coming back to the migration journey, I would say, and I talked about this in the beginning. So how can organizations then actually get lean and then also stay lean with SNP's help?
Yeah, I think getting lean and staying lean is today a much more important topic than it was a couple of years back, right? For 2 reasons: operational cost, also with on HANA and in RISE, are not decreasing. They need to be managed well, right? And managing the database size is one aspect. But more important is the fact that we all want to use our data for AI purposes. And you don't want to use rubbish data on AI for AI purposes, because you get rubbish out, right? So I think it is we need to have a mind change in how we manage data, right? And I compare it to how we manage stores, right? When I look into the stationery store in our office, there are neat pens, working pens, and there are a couple of writing pads, and the old stuff is thrown out, right, on a regular basis. It looks neat and organized. When I look into SAP systems, it reminds me more of my basement, right? For 20 years, I pushed in everything that it didn't need, and I don't even have a mechanism of going into the basement, throwing out what I don't need anymore, right? And I think that is sort of a mind change that needs to happen. We need to start managing this. And we have cool solutions for that. We have decommissioning, we have the selective data migration, but decommissioning and the archiving solution, our output solution, and Klaus Zimmer will talk about that in more detail later.
Perfect. And I think this is actually a good ending point for now, Michael, for the first introduction, I would say. Thank you for talking and introducing these broad challenges. And probably later we will see you again during the Q&A, because again, everyone, please put in your questions that you have for Michael and for the others. But for now, Michael, thank you very much. I think it's time to talk a little bit details. And for that, we bring up the agenda. And as you can see, we talked about the challenges of RISE for now. So let's get a little bit more technical and talk about how SNP is actually handling minimizing system downtime during these migrations. And for that, Daniel, please join me on stage and take over from here.
Hello, everybody. Wishing you a good day. Thanks, Mikael, for introducing the topic. I will focus on SNP strategy and the approach which we use to move the systems over a larger scale into SAP RISE. Usually, the customers have either systems which are below the critical threshold to reach a reasonable downtime, and many customers have systems which are large enough to get over the threshold of achieving let's say weekend downtime to move the system to RISE. I will at first describe what is the general strategy specifically for the near zero downtime approach, because that's where we have the most value added for the customers. It's coming with build of the system, which is a baseline for the data migration in SAP RISE. So we start on the far left, getting the source of this information to build the new system from the current production system, which can be on-premise. Still within the customer's premises, this empty system, which is created using SNP shell, can be upgraded to the target S/4HANA release. And not necessarily we need to speak about S/4HANA, but this is the example of moving an S/4HANA system. It can be also ECC moving to SAP RISE, or ECC to S/4HANA, like running the transformation on the fly. So in this specific case, with an upgrade on the fly, there will be the upgrade happening on customer premises, and backup of the system is then handed over to SAP to build the target environment, which suits then for customer and us as a vendor for the data migration. During this process, SAP uses an interim staging system where they test the import, and afterwards only the target environment on the far right is the one that we can connect to and we can use for the data migration. This whole process takes quite some time, and that's one of the values of the NZD approach with SNP, that this activity is coming in the system uptime during the business as usual operations. It doesn't count to the downtime in the end. Then when we have the target system ready, we go through the standard methodology with using the test cycles to test out the approach, to test out the capabilities of the systems, of network, till we get to the downtime phase or the cutover. And that is split into the two parts. The first one is the uptime data migration for near zero downtime, where we move approximately 90% of the database footprint to the target environment, and then the downtime phase when we move the rest. If there's an upgrade, either S/4HANA upgrade on the fly or ECC to S/4HANA transformation, based on the system size and the complexity of the scenario, we can do the post-processing also in the uptime phase to minimize the downtime duration and to minimize the cutover duration. To get into a bit more details about this approach, it's split into approximately 13 steps on this slide for the go-live execution. And we leverage the presence of a sandbox system to minimize the impact on the business as usual operations. So on this figure, you can see the top dark grayish dots, which represent the activities on production system. In the middle, dark blue dots are representing activities on a sandbox system, which is a clone of production system. And at the bottom, those activities are happening on the target environment in SAP RISE. So we start at first with activating the database triggers in the production system. Afterwards, getting the clone of production system to the sandbox system. That's the step number 3. To do the initial load, the uptime data migration from sandbox system, leveraging all the system resources available there, not touching the production system at all, except capturing the keys for the changes which are happening during the delta period. The length of the delta period is specific for the customer, the system size, the performance of the source and target system, or the network bandwidth. We minimize it during the test cycles to squeeze it to possible minimum to do the go live execution as short as possible, also with the minimized downtime. Once we complete the uptime data migration, in case there is an post-processing in place, we apply it in the target system. And during the go live, then we do the preparations on the source production system when we're reaching the end of the delta period, prepare the downtime data migration, and run the downtime data migration from production system to the target environment. And those are the steps 8 to 11. In case there's a post-processing on the target system necessary, then we do the post-processing, step 12, and final SNP automated data validation at the end. So this is a simplified view on the near zero downtime itself during the go live. And I would like to also share with you an example of runtimes for such data migration. This is a data migration of a retail system, fairly large S/4HANA system, which was on-premise, and we moved it to SAP RISE in the hack. For the uptime data migration, that's the left part, we were able to squeeze it from original approximately 8 days in the uptime phase to final 3-4 days during the go live. But the most important part where the customers are sensitive is the downtime. That's the reason why we are doing the near zero downtime approach. And during this specific project, we were able to hand over the system after the SNP technical activities after 10 hours, moving approximately 8 terabytes on the S4HANA disk and doing the upgrade to the recent S4HANA release, including SNB automated data validation at the end of the execution, which was part of the downtime activities on SNB side. And I would be happy to answer your questions later on in the Q&A session. So handing over back to Patrick. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel, for this short but very, very comprehensive overview on NZD and how we deal with it at SNP. Cool. So I suggest that we move along in the agenda. Things are running quite smoothly. And as we said in the beginning, and also together with Michael, benefits of smart data management are today even more important than they were a couple of years ago, right? So Klaus, please join me on stage and walk us through why that is and how we at SNP can help actually delivering value in terms of smart data management.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, within such transformation projects, RISE with SAP, migration to S/4HANA, there should also be some thoughts on the data management, actually the data lifecycle management of the systems being involved. On the one hand, here to the left, we have the legacy system, which has been left behind. The challenge is there any data left which have to be retained for legal requirements, for audit purposes, or for company internal analysis needs? We have to address that. Keeping the system alive for read-only purposes is not the most effective, which we will see a little bit later on. So what we call application retirement might be the right process over here. And on the other hand, we have the new system, our S/4HANA in RISE, for example, where we have to pay attention that it doesn't grow too fast, too quickly. We would run into difficulties with the total cost of ownership, for example. Here, active archiving is the task which we would like to motivate our customers to take a look at. And I would like to explain that within the next minutes. So let's get started with the new S/4HANA system. The challenge which we typically see in here is tackling the data tsunami. With the digitization, we have a lot of data coming into the system, even more than we would have expected. And if we do nothing, we have the situation here on the left side. The system just grows over time. That's, of course, not ideal. And our idea is to change that towards the situation on the right, basically moving the growth towards the archive. So the ideal situation which we have in here might perhaps not be achieved to 100%, moving in as much, archiving as much data as new data comes in. That would be the ideal case and keep our new HANA database completely stable. But with some means, it can get somewhat close to it and ensure that our invest in the new S4 system is being protected. How would we do that? So the idea is classifying the data according to the value for the business. When we look at the system, of course, the data which represents the open business transactions, which is being used by many users in daily operation, of course, need to stay in the S/4HANA database. That's the hot data, and that's why we invest in such technologies with in-memory databases and so on. However, after a certain time, data becomes mature, business transactions are being closed, data is fixed, doesn't change anymore. And of course, it is less frequently accessed, even by a smaller audience. And this is where we can consider to take action and move the data from our operational database towards the archive. So we have to consider some of criteria here to enable this archiving process, which has been well established in SAP systems even for decades. As I said, the access frequency plays a big role. The audience, only few users need to have this data available for dedicated purposes. Why keep them in the current database? And also, when you consider, for example, FI data after the fiscal year has been closed, the fiscal year-end reporting has been run, there is less needs to really work with the data very intensively. So you have less display and analysis needs with the data. That's the perfect point in time where we could move the information, the data, towards the archive, where we could actually archive this data. Of course, it doesn't have to stay in the archive forever. So there's some additional points we have to consider. Mentioned here, we have to set up retention rules. How long do we keep this data protected in the archive? Just an example, typical FICO data in Europe would need to be kept for about 10 years. In some countries, a little bit less. In some countries, a little bit more. So we set up this rule for the respective company code. We set up the retention period accordingly. And we can then keep this information in the archive. We can scan that occasionally so that data that has been expired could be removed. One point we need to consider for the archive also is we need to ensure compliant storage so that the data is protected as long as the retention period still is active, and that it can get deleted also according to data privacy legislation once it's no longer needed for any purpose in the company, no interest, and can thus be deleted. How can we support this process with SAP means? Said the basis is a standard SAP archiving process. Michael mentioned that earlier in his part. And this process is not as frequently used as it should be. So we see that in many customer projects that there is some shortcomings which make basically the archive administrator's life somewhat difficult. And here at SNP, we developed some add-on solution which works on top of the standard SAP archiving process and which will now help our customers to address these shortcomings effectively. First of all, we need to analyze which data actually is in scope for archiving. Can it all be archived? Does it not have any open items, which is the most struggler preventing archiving of the data? For this, we have a dedicated analysis feature, which also enables us to determine the data distribution across company codes, across fiscal years, and other criteria, which is important to set up the archiving process effectively. When it then comes to the archiving process itself, you will recognize that certain parts of it, in the standard SAP process, are to be taken manually. There is some cumbersome interaction with some of the topics and some of the tasks which are necessary over here. And we now created a solution component which will help to automate some of these manual processes effectively. Specifically, the variant creation, which we can do according to the analysis results, according to the overall data in scope of getting archived. This automation helps to reduce the efforts for the whole process significantly. And one of the additional benefits is that we can also parallelize certain of these tasks, for example, when you want to run respective data archiving processes overnight. As I said, we don't have to keep the data forever, so respective retention management is necessary as well. We have a dedicated component in here where our users can set up the retention rules, where they can process the retention appliance according to the the retention periods which have been set. So to verify, let's say, regularly, once a year or once a quarter, whether certain data has been outdated and should be removed from the archive. And we do so with a respective component in here. Another point is when we archive this data, where shall it be retained? So we have to ensure that we have a compliant archive hosting this information. And to get connected to the SAP system, we provide a pure software interface which connects the actual S/4HANA or the actual SAP system, the respective archive, for example, both in the cloud. There's no external infrastructure needed, and that makes our solution very lean, very effective for this purpose. There's some other optional add-ons which are on top. Just want to mention so-called transparentization for archive data so that they can be used from external analysis tools such as Power BI, Tableau, Qlik, SAP Analytics Cloud, and so on. And the option to, we call it virtualize the index, meaning some of the index information which is normally stored in the operational database. And if that's used only occasionally, it might cover some space, which is ineffective. We can remove that to the archive as well. With this add-on solution, we help our customers to run the whole archiving process more effectively, more regularly, and this way it's even more often applied to the system, helping our customers to reduce the data footprint and save costs running on S/4HANA. Let's take a look at the second topic regarding the legacy system, which has been left behind within our migration scenario. Typically, there is some data which have been left behind that need to be kept, either for audit purposes or for company internal analysis needs. And as I said earlier, keeping this ECC as a read-only is not the best option. It's cumbersome. It takes respective efforts to keep the system up and running, keep the licenses, the operative system, and so on, maintain these, and thus it is somehow expensive. What we now want to motivate our customers is to use dedicated software solutions to get rid of the infrastructure, but keep the data. And that's exactly what our data fridge solution is focusing on. To consistently retain the data and the linked documents so that they can be accessed for users who need to access these, also for the auditors. We can also here set up respective retention rules, define retention periods, similarly to the operative system as just mentioned before, so that we can protect the data in this data fridge archive as long as it's actively used for the mentioned audit or analysis purposes and can get deleted afterwards. Also here, we consider legal hold. So in case there's a dedicated situation where certain data has to be retained for a longer period, we can easily consider that. And most important for the users is to have a transparent and flexible approach, display and analysis option to access the data. How does that work? I would like to give you a short overview on our concept and features. So here from the left to the right, we have our legacy systems, which are in scope of getting retired. Sometimes it's only one system, but we can also cover multiple systems in the same manner. We install a small extraction program, all coded in ABAP, so a small transport, which will be installed in the source system. And this will then extract all the information which we have to retain. Basically, we are retaining all application data, all master data, all customizing information which we need to use to interpret the information and migrate it to the so-called data fridge archive. That could be on premises. Nowadays, it's more often that cloud repositories are requested by our customers. And here we cover all the typical hyperscalers which our customers intend to use. We recommend that you use a relational database for storing the legacy information just to the purpose that the response times is reasonable when accessing the data later on. And currently, we access the data, for example, from your new S/4HANA system. Here we would install a small ABAP-based add-on solution which contains the respective features to access the data which we stored in the data fridge archive. It contains technical browsers, similarly like SE16N or display transactions. Currently, we cover with our standard delivery more than 160 display transactions to do so, which then enables the users to access the data as they are used to from their legacy environment. Basically the same look and feel, not to 100%, but very close, which they had from their legacy systems. Makes it very easy because you don't need any additional infrastructure. You just need a respective archive store, typically in the cloud. In normal projects, our customers already have this, so there's just the intention to enhance that according to the data volume they have to keep. And the new S/4HANA system is there anyways, providing a still SAP-centric approach to the data. For the future, we will enhance this option even a little bit further. We are now developing an even SAP-independent option to do so, just in case that is necessary on top. Sometimes, in addition to the SAP-centric need, there's also the need to access the data independently based on a browser, for example. And with this, we enable our users, our customers, that they can retire the legacy system, that they can actually switch it off and get rid of the operation costs and efforts to run this and access this legacy data directly from their new S/4 system, making it much easier. Yeah, that was the short overview I wanted to provide on this concept and features, and I hand it back to Patrick.
Perfect, Klaus. Thank you so much. Couldn't agree more on everything you just said. Lean data, super, super, super important. Now, as I said in the beginning, we want to focus at least 10, 15 minutes on your questions, right? And I think a great segue into the Q&A session is actually the second live poll that I just launched a couple of minutes ago. A lot of you have already seen it. So let's bring up the results, because this will be the perfect segue and transition to our Q&A. So we asked you, while Klaus was talking, if your company is considering RISE with SAP, which factor is the biggest priority for you? And it's cool that we have a lot of questions on near zero downtime, because speed was super important for all of you. So all of you agreed on we need to move quickly and minimize business disruption. It's great that we have a couple of answers to that question, to that challenge in store, and we see it in the Q&A. So let's, I would say, jump into the Q&A session. And for that, let's bring up all three speakers again up on stage. Hello, Michael. Hello, Daniel.
Hi.
And hello, Klaus. So we have right now currently 8 questions in the room, and they are all ranked by vote count. So everyone, if you're still with us, in the right engagement interaction panel, you see the thumbs up button. If you see a question that you relate to, that you resonate with, just give it a thumbs up and it will appear. I see people already got it. Very good. So let's start with the first one, talking about downtime minimization, right? Daniel, is 10 hours downtime actually a benchmark to have into account?
In German, ja. So yes and no. As I have mentioned, it's heavily dependent on the performance of the source system, the performance of the target system, and network bandwidth. All these factors are in the formula. If I can take it as a benchmark for the system of a similar size, so that was approximately 8 terabytes of data on disk in HANA database, yes, I would say that could be a benchmark, because in those 10 hours, as you have seen, approximately 2+ hours were for the automated data validation, just to make sure that we are handing over data migration and S/4HANA upgrade. And we know that the numbers match between the source system and the target system on the standard SAP application layer using the standard SAP reports. So there's a huge benefit. And we always do it in such scenario. Post-processing was single hours, approximately 2 hours. And for the downtime data migration, in this case, it was 5.5 hours. For such big system, yes, I would say this could be a reference number. If I would be asked by any customer whether we can do it faster, theoretically, yes. Can it take longer? Possible.
Depends on the specifics, right, Daniel?
Absolutely.
Daniel, I think there is a lot of potential to reduce the downtime, and obviously it goes hand in hand with the contributions customers do, in terms of minimizing their validation time, data validation time, and gearing up hardware and improving bandwidth and stuff like that. So in that sense, it's a joint effort to reduce it beyond the 10 hours, I would say.
Absolutely.
Perfect. I like it, guys. Let's keep it as dynamic. Yeah. So if anyone wants to jump in for any answer, that's great. But please make your answers as long as necessary and as short as possible, so that we can cover all of them. So next up, Klaus, probably I look in your direction. We are in the process of migrating to S4. When should we consider to decommission our legacy system?
That should be done actually when you go live with your new S/4HANA. The reason is just easy. As the solution already implies data fridge, we freeze the situation of the data when we extract these for the data fridge archive. So we need to have a stable situation, and that comes once you go live with the new S/4HANA.
Cool. Thank you so much. Now,
and
next
possibly to add to this, Klaus, it can be done once the traffic on the old system is really reduced. It might be in the first month still going on quite a bit, but then you can fairly quickly switch it off.
That's right. So typically, our customers would have the system still alive, read-only option, let's say for a few months. And during that time, we would run the decommissioning project. We can do so in the back. Users would not be disturbed by accessing the data for read purposes. But during this during the project runtime, they would still be able to access the data, and that matches with the intention of most of the customers.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So next question is this applicable for a brownfield project? I think this was posted during Daniel's talk, but I have to admit I'm not 100% sure.
I can take over. Short answer is yes. And I would add that not necessarily just projects where we have a transformation on the fly. For the brownfield, it means ECC to S4HANA. It can be also one-to-one migration, either ECC system or S4HANA system, or S4HANA with move to a newer release of the S4HANA environment.
All right, makes sense. Thank you, Daniel. Michael, anything to add? You look like you would want to say something.
No.
All right.
I was just looking at the next question.
Really good. Then I think I will give it to you. So how do you handle SAP migration in waves, especially data that is shared by multiple entities?
Yeah, we have developed an approach. We call it minimize downtime on target for migrating into an existing system. And there are a couple of techniques on how to do it. I think it would go beyond what we can cover today, but it's definitely, if you're interested, approach us directly or through the website, and we can set up a session on that.
Awesome. And I think this is a general shout out. Either directly contact us on website or LinkedIn, the four of us, right? Search us there. Obviously, we will take up your specific challenge and bring it to the teams. Cool. Next question. Is there a business case for going from 2 productive systems with 4 clients into 1? Where are the potential savings and how high? Michael, would that be something for you?
It's a very general question, right? And the short answer, if you are just looking at the hosting cost and put the project expenses of merging into one system, if you keep 4 clients, it's probably doable. If you want to have 1 client, it's more a matter of, does the business want to be run in 1 client, or do they want to have separate systems, right? So from that perspective, purely from I'm saving a little bit of database space and maintenance cost, it will probably not be justified.
Makes sense. Thank you, Michael.
If you look into the bigger picture, less support, less people, more harmonized processes, moving closer together, one source of truth and stuff like that, then we are getting there.
All right, thank you. So next question, do you have best practices or customer references that you can show? Thanks. Yes, we do have some. We can take now maybe 1 or 2 minutes to actually, Michael, show 1 or 2 slides.
No,
maybe.
Daniel, you mentioned already Coop, right? In your talk, no?
I did. Maybe I would answer whether we have best practices. Yes, we do. And it's the know-how which we have gained over many years, specifically for near zero downtime projects. The example which I have shown is the usage of the sandbox system for the uptime data migration. There are several NZD approaches dependent on the vendor and the scenario. This one, which I have explained, is literally eliminating any traffic on the production system. So we can do our work, vast majority of the work in the system uptime, and do the rest in the downtime. That's the best practice, which I have already explained. And we apply it on majority of the NZD projects.
Yeah. And just to add to this, we've done near zero downtime projects well before S4 came around, right? So this is it's a mature, stable technology. Yes, with S4 you have a couple of other challenges that we need to adhere to, but it's something that we do for long, and we have a lot of experience on that. Yeah.
So to add, yes, the best practice which we do have in our blood is already built in the methodology, which we are transparently explaining our customers and partners in the early stage of the project and applying that to most possible extent, dependent on the situation on the customer side, of course. And for the examples, I believe we should have and can share more examples like the one from COPE, which I have presented. Back to Patrick.
Yeah, all right. I would say, park that for now to cover as many questions as possible. Let's see in the end if we have more time. Quick remark from moderator here. We initially scheduled for 50 minutes. We are already over, but I really want to keep going this great conversation. So I suggest let's keep the webinar going for another 8 minutes to cover as many questions as possible. And if we then still have some time, let's focus on even more customer references.
So if I can take the next one, is there something specific to consider if we have central finance migration to S4? If you are talking about system consolidation, merging the central finance into your ECC system, yes, definitely it's a little bit different, right? And we need to look into this in more detail. And we are happy to talk to you about your specific requirements.
Great, cool. Klaus, archiving question. How can I determine which data shall be in scope of archiving and which data should not be in scope, right?
Very good question. And we saw in the past that there's some of our customers, past customers, who have been struggling with that to identify where to get started with this archiving process. Fortunately, we have some additional tools. So we have a very good analysis tool, the Crystal Bridge analysis scan, which we have been using in the past pretty often, and which, of course, all of our customers can use. There we can determine which are the largest tables, how can we assign these to the so-called archiving objects, and then, of course, the biggest one wins. Yeah, so you get started with the one which has the most data, which makes the most sense. And if our customers would perhaps not be familiar to do that on their own, we can support them with respective services to help them how the best approach would be based on the results for their individual database.
Great. Thank you so much, Klaus. All right. Near zero downtime depends on database size. Can you share database size of a specific system you have migrated with related timing? Daniel, I think you already touched on that. You want to, I would say, explore a little bit more on that?
I can repeat the answer. That was 8 terabytes on disk. That was a source S4HANA system released 2020. The target was S4HANA 2022. Comparing to a non-NZD data migration to SAP RISE on HAC, the source system was 1 terabyte, the same S4HANA release, so S4HANA 2020. Target was also S4HANA 2022. That downtime without near zero downtime was approximately 8 hours, including automated data validation.
All right. Thank you. So next up, do the figures of near zero downtime apply to selective data migration? Daniel, take it away.
I would say no. The reason why okay, figures. If we're speaking about the runtimes, definitely no, because it's about the volume of data which is selected for the data migration. If we move 10% over to the target system, that's the data volume for which we need to count the downtime. It's not the full database volume.
But Daniel, I think the question aims at whether we can also apply a near zero downtime approach if we have a selective data migration, right? If we only take a time slice or something.
The answer is yes in this case.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we can do selectivity. Usually it's on a company code level, or time slice, or a combination of these two aspects as the usual selectivity for selective data migration.
Understood. Thank you, Daniel. Klaus, archiving question. If the client is on premise, can we leave the archiver on site and upload the rest?
Yes, sure. So we are using standard SAP protocols to connect the active system with the archive. So in both cases, when we talk about data fridge, we can do so in the same way as with the operative systems. You can combine it, leading system in the cloud, archive on premises, or vice versa.
Makes sense. Cool. Klaus, thank you so much. All right. One new question that was quickly upvoted just now seems to be interesting for folks. Michael, I would say I give it to you as a first step.
Yeah. Is the argumentation line to have a PRD in EMEA, Asia, and Americas line because of the maintenance and risk? This is not really a topic that SNP is very familiar with, right? Customers are coming to us and saying, "This is how we want to set it up. Can you execute it?" How the business cases work behind it is something that you really need to discuss with SAP or with some of the system integrators. What I can tell you is obviously if you have a central development environment that provides that feeds the three PRD systems in the three different regions, then you definitely have a fairly standardized core and harmonized processes and ensure that it's not deviating too much in the regions, and that at the end of the day determines your operational or also determines your operational cost.
Great. Thank you, Michael. So last three questions. We are almost sharp at 4 p.m. here in Europe. So can you give some examples on what are the NZD and non-NZD data, Daniel, in your specific use case?
Okay. So imagine that you have thousands of tables which you have populated in your SAP system. This specific case, S/4HANA system. From those thousands of tables which are populated, we pick the largest tables with a reasonable volume of changes that are then used to set the database triggers on and to migrate them over in the uptime phase during the initial load. What are the examples of such tables? For this case, I'm almost sure it was ACDoka, it was MadDog, it was change documents, it was PRCD elements. So usually the largest tables which we do find in S/4HANA are part of this list. What we can exclude and usually exclude from this list are tables which can be larger but have so huge amount of changes that the data migration of such table would take longer if we apply all the delta changes captured during the delta period than running the data migration just in downtime. So even again, one of the best practice which we have in the methodology, that it's not a list which is set in stone from the very beginning, it's tailored during the project.
Perfect. And I think the last one, this is also jumping off your last answer, right? What about NZD with a data base size of 15 terabytes? So what would be a benchmark for downtime there?
Okay. I would say it can be comparable to what I have presented. 15 terabytes, either it's on a relational database or it's on HANA or it's S/4HANA with the compression of S/4HANA on disk. We always try to migrate as much data during the initial load as possible. And as I have mentioned, it's usually approximately 90% of the database footprint. So I believe with help of the customer, because we are heavily dependent on what the customer can provide us during from the perspective of the system performance and the network bandwidth, we can achieve comparable downtime. And if it's a relational database and fast setup, maybe even better.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. Now, last question for today. Daniel, this was also asked during your presentation, so I will give it first things first to you. How do you secure the interim system?
If it's related to the interim system during the build of the target environment, because this is not clear which interim system we're speaking about, then we
Daniel, I think it's the interim system that you use during the test migrations.
During the migrations.
Yeah.
Okay. Just let me finish for this. If it's the one of the interim systems for the build of the target system, we don't use them. So it's just the source and target. If we're speaking about the sandbox system, so once we set up the triggers on the production system, then request a clone of production system into Project Sandbox. That sandbox is usually in an isolated environment, sitting on an island. So not even the BDLS is required. It can have the same SID, and we know that it's isolated. Nobody can log in except the SNP users and the basis users. So if it's about the security of this system, so it doesn't have any inbound or outbound traffic, it's on the customer side to secure that this system is isolated on an island.
And it's still in the same network, so it's not somewhere remote, obviously.
Makes sense. Guys, thanks a lot. This was great. So you have now deserved a cold drink, the three of you. Thanks for joining me on stage, for your great presentations, and now for your openness during the Q&A. I say thank you so much. You can now leave the stage, because I have one last thing that I want to mention here while we close the session, because we, of course, hope that this was time, I would say, spent in a valuable way for all of you. And speaking about valuable time for you, I would really like to invite, on behalf of the whole SNP team, invite all of you to Transformation World 2025. Because this year, again, as in past years, we will be hosting our SNP Transformation World here in Heidelberg. It's a 2-day event taking place. You see it here, June 25, 26. And in our, I would say, humble opinion, this is really one of the leading events for data-driven enterprise transformation, everything that has to do with migrating data, focusing on business data management and business agility. So we really try in these 2 days to bring together customers, partners, experts, and leaders within the whole ERP and SAP environment to really focus on community building, share insights, share strategies, and real-world success stories. So take this as your formal invitation, scan the QR code. I hope to personally welcome you all in Heidelberg, June 25. And with that, thank you for the attention for today. Thank you for the great engagement, for all of your questions, and talk soon. Have a great day.